how we think of figures of all kinds. Figures, of course, the word figures, it conjures up all sorts of ideas. We can think, a lot of people sort of think of figures in mathematical terms. Maths is full mathematical numbers of figures, also geometric shapes we think of as figures, but we also think of our own figure, and mine's quite nice. Bit thick around the middle, but apart from that, it's not too bad, especially given my advancing years. So we can think of figures in this way. And what I'm trying to do is actually show the relationship between what gives form to the figures, which is essentially energetic, and how what gives form to the figures, or is figural, relates to the presence of space everywhere, which is transfigural. And this is essentially what I'm trying to illustrate here. If we think of the whiteness on this sheet of paper that I drew this little sketch on as being extended out to infinity, just everywhere, think of that whiteness everywhere. In reality, in nature, we blackness everywhere, but the way we tend to write things is black on white instead of white on black, which would be better. We could actually think of the whiteness as representing that presence of a space of as an infinite depth or openness which is everywhere. And if we can refer to that kind of space as omni-space, the omnipresent, limitless, infinite space. And then we can think about how this space gets dynamically configured, or energetically configured, by the figural or energetic aspect of nature. That energetic aspect we can think of in physics terms of electromagnetism, all sorts of things, but we won't get too bogged down in that. The essential point then is we can think how we can dynamically configure a figure, as an energetic configuration of space in figure and the figures in space. If we look here, we can see the space inside the figure, and the figure configures that internal space in the presence of omnispace everywhere. So we've got a local figure, with a local internal space incorporated in and incorporating space everywhere. And we could put another figure next door to it, the same kind of thing. The idea was we have a figure or an energetic configuration of space in figure and figure in space. And we could put it next door, but not actually figurally touching the other figure. So what we now have is two figures. These two figures are not actually touching one another, they're not actually connected with one another as such, but they are pooled together within the omnispace everywhere, which is regarded as a presence, not an absence. Okay? So that's the situation we have, and if we look at it that way, we can recognize four distinct regions of space. There is space everywhere, which is omnispace. There is space actually within the dynamic figures. Okay, remembering that the boundary, I must say, I've drawn it as a dotted line to show it's energetic and permeable. But it's not like a sieve, it's actually energetic. Yes, it's continually in motion. So that dotted line is sort of like a truly fluid or energetic boundary. So it configures an internal space, which we call the intra-space, that is simply the space within. And it's coming, and then we have the boundary itself, and we have then an interspace, which is the space between the figures. But the intra-space is continuous with the interspace through the boundaries. So there is a trans-space or a transfigural space which is continuous through the boundaries between intra, and inter. And all of those are continuous with space everywhere. So we have that idea now. Here I've drawn two non-contiguous figures, but they're in a pool of common space. Now we could think about how the figures potentially could get together. And first of all, as they come towards one another, the first possibility is for them to become contiguous. Contiguous means figurally connected. yeah, or fully, in physical contact. So we bring the figures into physical contact. But at this moment here, there is the internal intraspace is still distinguished from the interspace, yeah, by their energetic boundaries. Then, of course, the exciting possibility is, what if we were able to open the boundaries between these two? And in fact, that's perfectly possible. There are many examples of such boundary opening that occur between figures in contact. And I've done a lot of work looking at the phenomenon of hyphal fusion, the fusion between cells of fungi that allows that. So essentially, the figures conjugate. Yeah? And this is a deep form of connectedness, which results in the coalescence, yes, of the figural boundaries and the coalescence of the internal space. When you actually see this happen, and I've actually filmed it happen, you can see a visible release of energy. There's a visible recoil at the moment when the boundaries and in the intraspace connect. And so that's a form of connectivity which is slightly different from that one. And of course, what we're recognizing here is the difference between thinking about connectedness and continuity, which comes with the presence of space everywhere. So we can look at how that we've got an interplay here between these, so that if you go in that direction, you get individuation or proliferation of the figures, but they're still distinct but not discrete. And if we move that way, you get condensation or coalescence. And coalescence, beautiful example of that coalescence is if you put two drops of water next to one another on a smooth surface. As they come into contact, their surface tense boundaries suddenly meet, and you get this rush of and reciprocal flow of each into the other as the boundaries coalesce. Exactly the same kind of phenomenon as I'm showing there.